you're a professional in that?
Yeah, so I'm a professional paddleboarder. I teach coaches, like I'll train new instructors to go out and teach people on the water. So I work with a company called Paddle Fit, and I love it. It's what I call active relaxation because I can get out there and move my body, but it's not overexerting myself, and there's no impact on your body. And you're out in the sunshine and in nature and surrounded by water with negative ions. So there's all these positives to it. So I love it.
Yeah, we'll do a little bit of paddleboarding, and I like it. It's not the easiest thing to do, but
Yeah.
I understand how it comes to like health and fit and all those things. Yeah,
Yeah, there's
it's
a little
really
bit of a learning curve to it, but you just have me out to Hungary and I will take you out on the water and we'll just go have some fun because I've never been to Hungary and I'd love to paddle there. So,
Have you been to Europe?
yes. Yeah. So I
You've been
paddled
to
in the Venice canals actually, and
Oh,
I've
nice.
paddled in Norway and I've paddled in on Lake Como in Italy, but I've
Okay.
never been to Hungary. So that's something on my list.
In Hungary, we have the one of the biggest lakes. It's called Lake Balaton, which
Okay.
is one of the largest lakes in Europe, and it's kind of calm water, and apparently it's fresh water, so it's just a fantastic, beautiful place to paddle.
I love that. Okay, I'm going to look that up when we're done because that
Sure,
sounds beautiful. And that's my
sure,
favorite is the freshwater calm lake. So
sure.
awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to jump right in here with the Get Fit with Jodelle podcast. Welcome to the
Mhm.
Get Fit with Jodelle podcast. I am, as usual, Jodelle. And did you know that the mitochondria are not only responsible for energy production, but also water production in your body? Yes, you make your own water. And what if making your own water could help promote fat loss to increase your health? To get rid of things like diabetes and obesity or your risk for those things as well as cancer. I love to talk about things like that, especially when it comes to the topic of fat loss. I do a lot of podcasts on that and real solutions that are outside the box with strategies, not about just eat less and move more. So I wanted to bring somebody on that knows about this. And I'm talking with Dr. Laslo Boros about something called deuterium. You won't see this listed normally on health and diet websites, and about how making mitochondrial water can help you lose fat, detox. And we're going to learn today about something called Deutenomics, or the science behind endurance, performance, and health via the regulation of something called deuterium in nature. And as an endurance athlete myself and a paddler, I love this. So I can't wait to share this with you, all this great information. In fact, stay tuned because if it's okay with Dr. Boris, I'm going to do some rapid fire questions on the topics that have to do with deuterium and fat loss and supplements, because I want his expert opinion on this too. So, Dr. Laslo Boros is a retired professor of pediatrics at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, the School of Medicine, and the inventor of the Human Deutenome Project and Deugnostics, which I might be pronouncing wrong, as deuterium based medical diagnostics, including imaging and laboratory methods, in order to map the distribution of deuterium in the human body with structural and functional interpretations as it relates to disease and health. He's also an expert in using metabolic profiling and mitochondrial nanomechanics to further the understanding of particularly aggressive cancers, which I lost my mom to cancer, which is why I do what I do. So I understand the passion for that. He also participates in research projects targeting population metabolic disorders such as diabetes and obesity. And he's an internationally recognized expert of metabolic water biochemistry, as well as deuterium mediated kinetic isotope effects in health and disease. So this guy knows his stuff and he has studied his stuff. So welcome very much. And it's an honor to have you, Dr. Boris.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you very much for this very nice, kind introduction. Uh, yeah, there are some new paths, new grounds that we have to cover, but most of it is practically just to serve our how to be free of chronic diseases. And I'm sorry to hear about your mom. I lost my twin to
No.
cancer back in 2006. and we know how that is. So Deuteronomics is something to help
Mhm.
to understand these disease processes better, and after all, uh, maybe offer just some outcomes in on the better kind of look at and better end. But that's practically what it is. It's a new field of biochemistry, medical biochemistry. I did research of about 25 years at UCLA, and before that, I was at Ohio State University. And I'm a teacher, I'm a scientist, I'm a medical doctor, but my main activities are related to science and education. And I also do a lot of reviews for scientific papers, and I also do a lot of editorial work for some of the major journals. So it's kind of a, I wouldn't say the last stage of my scientific career, but pretty much into kind of making this happen for the broader audiences. So I'm very happy to participate in your podcast, of course. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. And yeah, I've listened to quite a few of your podcasts over the years and finally got the courage to reach out. I thought, oh, this guy will never podcast with me. I'm sure he's so busy. So, but when I heard you talk about your twin that you lost, that was what really sparked my interest. I was like, this guy has a passion for what he does, for helping people. And that's a lot of the times why we get into what we do, like why I teach nutrition and lifestyling is because my mom didn't lead a good lifestyle. And if we'd have known then maybe about deuterium like we do now, maybe there was something we could have done. So it's nice that we can pay it forward now. I want to start out by helping my listeners understand the importance of what the human deuteronome is. Maybe I'm pronouncing that wrong as well, but you have a
No,
quote.
you're pronouncing it perfectly
Oh,
right.
good.
You
Okay,
know,
great.
yeah.
And with that, okay, here's another question. Your last name, is it Boros or Boris? Like, how do you pronounce your last name?
It's Boros
Boros.
if you are in Hungary, but
Okay.
it's Boros in the United States,
Okay.
and I'm not sure how they pronounce it in other countries, but Laslo is fine. Dr. Boros, Boros is
I
fine.
like
Boros
Boros.
is
Yeah, Dr.
yeah.
Boros. Okay, you have a quote on your blog that reads, and I quote, life is about proton and deuterium tunneling during metabolic water formation. So let's start with what deuterium is. In very layman's terms, my listeners love layman's as it relates to that human deuteronome.
Yeah, so these are very crucial questions to understand before you get into more complicated details. But practically, as long as we live, meaning that as long as we breathe air in and out, and we need oxygen from air, and as long as we eat the food that we eat, we need the hydrogen or the protons from the food to make water in our mitochondria. And oxygen and two hydrogens make up a water molecule, H2O, and that is formed in our mitochondria. This is why we breathe air in, and this is why we eat food. Now, of these two atoms, protons or hydrogen, if you look at the periodic table, it's on the left upper corner, meaning that it's the smallest element, it's the smallest atom for that matter, and it's the most active in biological systems, in living systems. And that means these hydrogens, I'm just using the water because it's simple enough, of these atoms in the water molecule, the hydrogens, the little ones, the little ping pong balls, are usually they make the oxygen bigger because it has a like more complicated nuclear structure, but hydrogens are the ping pong balls, and that's how they behave in biological systems. They kind of hop around, they transfer energy from one side to the other, and they also move certain proteins. As this is especially true in the mitochondria, where there are rotating proteins at high velocity. So we are actually a very dynamic system we actually have a lot of moving parts for that matter, and hydrogen seems to be the atom or the ball, the ping pong ball that hits these little levers and these little uh, notches. And so for that matter, in medical biochemistry is practically to follow the kind of the movement of these protons through very narrow protein tunnels. That's what we call tunneling. And this is how normal life or normal cells would use hydrogen for, they actually use it for energy transfer and for chemical bonds. And you have to look at hydrogen more like a very easy to move around, yet very quick, and also a very efficient uh, atom to transfer it from food to our own body components, because it's small, it's light in that sense. So it's part of and the essence of life to understand these proton hydrogen movements. Now, hydrogen has a stable isotope called deuterium, which is, again, it's one proton or a single proton in the nucleus, but it also has a neutron, which is a atomic nuclear part that is the same size as a proton and the same weight or the same mass as a proton. So it makes this stable isotope pair of hydrogen twice as heavy, twice as large. And the bigger problem is that this heavy twin brother of hydrogen that participates in life events or reactions, if it binds to the same place where hydrogen would bind, and if it replaces hydrogen in chemical bonds, and especially in moving parts, proteins, it's about 8.5 to 15 times harder to remove it. So it's kind of a sticky medicine ball compared to a golf ball. So it's practically, when it comes to a biological kind of basketball game where those atoms, those molecules are thrown the hydrogen, the little protons around. This is like practically deuterium is practically to, like, it's similar like throwing a medicine ball on the court, and nobody would know all of a sudden what to do with it because it doesn't bounce, it's heavy, it doesn't fly as far if you throw it with the same force. So it introduces a large problem, and it introduces a large kinetic isotope effect. This is how we call it. I use both terms, so if your audience is more shaped for scientific terms, then they can find those as well. But again, it's a sticky medicine ball in biology for the lay description of the situation. It's practically like, the other way to describe it is if you have a garage and you already kind of put different items in there, and you have a small car, all of a sudden somebody buys you an SUV for Christmas, let's say. It's a family gift, and all of a sudden you don't know where to park it because it does not fit into the same space where your protons or your car fits. So deuterium introduces a huge problem in all biological systems. And unfortunately, deuterium is, even though it's a rare isotope relatively compared to other stable isotopes in nature, you can compare this to carbon stable isotopes or oxygen stable isotopes, it's practically the damage that it delivers is very hard to kind of overcome or deal with when it comes to disease process, because it can break nanomotors, it can break ATP proteins, moving proteins, it can get stuck to sugar molecules that cannot be removed from binding sites, and it just behaves very differently when it comes to biochemical reactions or I would say, muscle functions or strength or those kind of energy demanding processes. So you want to keep your mitochondria literally deuterium free,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that you want as little deuterium to get into mitochondria as possible. And the heavy water, which is water is H2O, meaning that there is um, um, oxygen and two hydrogens, and when you replace one of the hydrogens with this heavy stuff, it will become semi-heavy water. And if you replace two of the hydrogens with deuterium, then it's going to be heavy water. And it has so different physical properties. You probably heard about the Second World War when the Germans were trying to get heavy water for their atomic power plants or to make these atomic, because it has a very different kinetic and also physical chemical properties in the atomic scale. So it behaves the same way in our mitochondria. So our mitochondria are not functioning, or they cannot function very efficiently if we have too much of this deuterium, because it just doesn't fit well with proton movements.
Mm-hmm.
And for that matter, if our food has too much deuterium, then our body, our biochemical systems cannot really get rid of all the deuterium that is necessary to protect these little delicate mitochondrial nanomotors. Mitochondria are these little cell organelles that use both the oxygen and the hydrogen from food to make water. In the meantime, they also make ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, which is necessary um, for energy, for biological energy transfers. So when mitochondria are damaged, then what we call is molecular crowding or metabolite crowding. The cells do not function too efficiently, and over time, chronic disease processes set in that are consistent with the organ that is most kind of damaged by excess deuterium in the environment. It can, unfortunately, can come in various sources. Food is one of, and water and drinks are like good examples of how deuterium, if those are not the right or not the appropriate food, or the source is not appropriate. Processed food, you probably covered in your podcast how processed food are different from natural grass-fed,
Mm-hmm.
especially carnivore type of eating, and how exercise, sunlight, oxygen, partial pressure, those are all very important to control for deuterium during this metabolic water formation. And this is very important because we make a lot of metabolic water, about 2,000 um, gallons a day, and we also recycle it. So it doesn't appear, it's kind of a dynamic system. You don't really see how much water you produce, but you certainly have to produce this much water, almost as much water as like how much water flow blood goes through your heart
Mm-hmm.
in a day. These are in equivalence, meaning that the flow is what matters here, how much is produced and recycled. And for that matter, we are looking at a very dynamic system where deuterium has a very clear physiological and medical role to maintain health, strength, and longevity. And you just name it, there's a whole list to this.
Yeah. Okay, so let me see if I hear what you're saying. So deuterium is almost like even maybe like a toxin that can sludge up. However, it's normal in all organisms. Like all organisms have deuterium and they have a way of getting rid of it. So we've got kind of this fine balance. But yet, if it's overdone in, let's say, processed foods and in lots of deuterium rich water and things like that, then it can build up as kind of a sludge in that mitochondrial energy system to where people might start to feel what, maybe like chronic fatigue, maybe they're having trouble detoxifying out other like toxins and heavy metals. And is deuterium kind of like a heavy metal since it is on the periodic table?
Well, it's not a metal. It's still a hydrogen, but
Okay.
it's a stable isotope of hydrogen because in the periodic table we differentiate among atoms based on the number of protons. And as long as any atom has one proton, it's gonna be called hydrogen or hydrogen's isotope. And metals have many, many protons. Hydrogen has only one, but and you're right, it's an oncoisotope. It's a sand in your gas tank. It's a heavy, kind of muddy, sticky stuff that is like not fitting in those very fine, delicate biological systems.
Mm-hmm.
And if they appear in excess amounts in your mitochondria, in your cells, then you're going to start first. Usually the first sign of a deuterium overload is fatigue and tiredness,
Mm-hmm.
and confused with kind of sleep pattern is the circadian rhythm is disrupted because deuterium plays a very crucial fundamental role in biological regulation. And this is one thing that I wanted to mention to you and your audience is that Deutenomics, the science now, what deals with proton deuteron ratios in organs, uh, had a very important high profile letter in the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States, we call PNAS, uh, just discussing the fundamental role of deuterium in biological regulation and disease processes. And also we have another paper in Pharmacology Research and Perspectives, which is now in the 99.5 percentile, meaning that it's one of the most read and downloaded papers of the medical peer-reviewed scientific literature. So the topic that we are covering right now is very vivid, or it's just very alert in like many different areas of medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And you can now see this in the medical literature, how many downloads, how many readings there are of these records. And you're right, because of this difference in chemical and physical behavior, it is an oncoisotope, it's a metabolic sludge.
Mm-hmm.
You can call it any way you want simply because it's just such a different entity when it comes to biology compared to its pair isotope hydrogen. So uh, it's bad stuff after all.
Well, and it is bad, but it's also, since it's found in every organism, I've heard you talk about how it does benefit the body in some ways, such as like the third trimester of a female who's pregnant. She offloads her deuterium into the baby because I guess it helps with growth and development. So everything in nature that's growing, plants and babies, they need the deuterium to like make flowers and make fruit on the plant to offload their deuterium. So there's a need for it, but it's in the right context. But what we're seeing, I guess, especially in my practice, if everybody's chronically tired and they've got this brain fog and kind of people will describe their body to me as I feel sludgy. I feel like I need a detox.
Mhm.
And to me, that's a big indicator that there's way too much deuterium that's coming in and not enough going out. So maybe we can talk about that in just a little bit, how to get rid of some of this deuterium. But I wanted to hear your thoughts on that growth factor of why deuterium is actually found in nature so much.
Yeah. So deuterium is probably one of the most critical element in providing stability, structural fitness in bones, collagens, and in the structural and growing body, it has a structural role. It doesn't have a moving role, but it has a structural role. So our body has to kind of route or kind of guide the deuterium to the right places where they can provide strength yet flexibility to a certain and stability, molecular stability. For example, collagen. Collagen is part of our bone structures, and also it's part of our ligaments, it's part of our joint capsules and so on. And that's where deuterium gets deposited. And in fact, if you live in a challenging environment, let's say if you're a gray seal in the Atlantic Ocean somewhere and you're chased by killer whales or white sharks, and then you have to dive in and deep and you have to come up very fast because of these pressure changes in your skeleton, your collagen will accumulate about 3 times of the natural abundance of deuterium in bone collagen, simply because, and this goes back in for example in writings, uh, like very old times in the Old Testament. You can read questions like, how can a mother's womb form bones? And we are talking about the babies, exactly what you were mentioning just a minute ago.
Yeah.
Indeed, the growing baby helps the mother to deplete deuterium, and it actually shows up in your heart functions. It shows up in various metabolic parameters. How beneficial is the baby to kind of relieve the mother of deuterium? And in fact, the first trimester is spent with morning sickness, because you want the growing baby, the very small fetus, to have less deuterium and kind of do a certain cell divisions, but not bone forming yet,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that when the real stuff starts after the second trimester, in the second and after the second trimester, the third trimester, when the baby is bigger, larger, and picks up or takes up more deuterium from the mother's body, then you can see physiological changes. A lot of autoimmune diseases regress. A lot of chronic diseases are gone in the last part of pregnancy, the second and third trimesters. And this is because of the deuterium download by the baby from the mother's circulation. So we can see this effect very clearly if you talk to medical professionals, but you approach these problems from the Deuteronomics angle. And this is what Deuteronomics is about as
Okay.
science.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you it looks for answers of these hard to explain medical facts. Uh, we find that based on editorial and review work, that once you bring in Deutenomics, once you bring in deuterium in the whole disease scenario or outcomes or diagnostic procedures, then you have a much better chance to understand or explain those findings. And it's the same with exercise, it's the same with sports. We are now into sports medicine, meaning that we are working with sportsmen just to see how they were able to perform or accomplish certain challenges simply by changing their diet from a high deuterium to a low deuterium diet. And now we are working with Alex McDonald from Australia, who ran 5 marathons in 5 days fasting. And if you are low in deuterium, or you allow your body to distribute deuterium to the right places because you just eat enough as what is in natural food, not processed food, but natural food, then you can accomplish incredible things. Even I'm surprised sometimes just to see how much a human body can accomplish as far as sporting challenges, 5 marathons in 5 days, only drinking water and salt. Then Alex did run 100 kilometers straight in about 6.5 hours. And certainly enough, he wasn't too tired at the end, and he was one of the 10% who could actually complete those races. So it seems like once we add Deutenomics to the biochemical or biological review of these accomplishments, because of this mass weight difference and the different chemical behavior of deuterium, as you mentioned, in chronic diseases, fatigue is a very common symptom, brain fog, sleep disorders, obesity, diabetes, cancer, those are all signs of a deuterium overload of longer periods of time. And it's just practically, if you're not eating the right food or not spending enough time processing deuterium and protons appropriately, then you may end up with chronic diseases that you may have to treat otherwise. And usually the dieting or the diet approach, once we implement a deuterium depleting diet, then there are better kind of medical outcomes, and there are improvements in those cases. And this is what we are trying to describe in the medical literature as scientific and as practical as possible, but that's practically the bottom of it.
Okay, that is so fascinating because I had a question on the Deutenomics as it pertains to athletes, and that answered it beautifully. It's like you're really just unsludging the system so these people can function better. And we'll talk about in a little bit how most likely they're burning their own fat, which also helps to deplete deuterium, and they're eating mostly probably fats as well. But I had a personal story because when you mentioned the guy that ran the marathons, I'm actually training for my first ultra, which is the 50K, and it's in January. I had a setback recently where I got a stress fracture in my ankle, and immediately something clicked inside me that said, you need to eat lots of butter, and you need to go back to, I'm usually what I call carnivore with benefits. So I'm always meat based, but I'll have, like, if we have persimmons growing outside in October, I eat those persimmons. Or if we have something locally that I can access in my local environment, I'll eat that. But then otherwise, I'm mostly carnivore. But when this happened, immediately my body said, you need to eat a lot of butter, and you need to stop eating everything else other than like meat and butter. And I don't know why, other than the deuterium aspect. So I kept just kind of listening to my body. And I feel like a stress fracture should be the same as like a bone break, where you're needing about 6 to 8 weeks before you can get back to any sort of activity. And with this, whatever my body wanted to do, my recovery has been a lot faster. And it was definitely a fracture to the point where I was wearing a walking boot. I had to have a medical boot on. But the recovery has been so much so that I wear the boot out of protection, but I'll walk around without my boot on and there's no pain. And so I'm like, am I healed? Do I run yet? Because I just feel like it happened a lot faster based on what my body was telling me to do. So I just wanted your opinion on that.
Yeah, that's what you're supposed to experience. We work with athletes, and we also work with acrobats.
Oh, cool.
And the acrobats are pulling muscles, they breaking stuff, I have a friend, he's one of the most known acrobats in Hungary. It's a brother, two brothers, and he constantly has injuries of those, while they are performing. And sure enough, if they were not in nutritional ketosis and grass-fed, mostly butter, he puts butter in his coffee, his injuries are usually 2 to 3 days.
That's awesome.
He wouldn't even allow stitches in his a few months ago, he called me from the hospital because a spring went through his skin above his eyes
Well,
and penetrated his skin. And he was asking me what to do. I told him, well, listen, you need to talk to the surgeons, but as long as there's no excessive bleeding, if they say okay, then why don't you just go home and see what happens, because you only need emergency care. You don't need kind of medical attention for these processes, for these healing skin lesions or skin lesions. And sure enough, in 3 days, it was almost hard to see if there was any damage there. And this is what we do with judo players. This is what we do with sportsmen. If it's not a broken bone, that usually they heal twice as fast
mhm.
as using any other approach, which is, I agree, this because your immune system works much better with low deuterium. Those cells are much more capable of producing those local inflammatory mediators that call in fibroblasts, and also cells that help repair those tissues. And for that matter, those should take a lot less time to
Mm,
heal completely.
awesome. And you mentioned the word ketosis, which I know kind of goes hand in hand with deuterium depletion. Now, to be quite honest, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that think it's a trend or a fad to go keto. And I have a lot of pro-metabolic people that watch this that believe in carbohydrates. So I just want people to keep an open mind about the fact that ketosis is not just a trendy way to lose weight. There's actually medicinal benefit to it in the way of deuterium depletion, as well as like a carnivore approach where you are actually only taking in foods that are low deuterium. So I wanted you to talk about that because, a lot of people, there's all these different schools of thought on like, is ketosis good? How long? How often? And so I wanted your thoughts on that because you particularly are a carnivore or you're meat based, yes?
Yeah, so this is actually a very simple question to answer. You're
Okay.
born to this planet in ketosis.
Right.
If you measure a baby's beta hydroxybutyrate level, you're going to find that baby's in ketosis. Actually, they are in ketosis in the first year of their life as long as they are breastfed,
Mm-hmm.
simply because milk is a very like anabolic or anaplerotic kind of food. So your body can grow very efficiently using and burning and kind of building all molecules into your body parts. This is how you can triple your body size to be in ketosis, to keep yourself in ketosis. This is what morning sickness is about. The mother has to be in ketosis to have a healthy baby. And this is how you wake up every morning. This is why you sleep for 6, 7 hours. How long you sleep, I'm not sure. I usually sleep 5, 6 hours, but this is the reason why you go to sleep. So you are not eating for 8 hours.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just watching TV, a baseball game, or uh, you get hungry, you just go to the refrigerator, you eat something, and your ketosis is gone. But when you fall asleep, then you burn your sugar in the first 3, 4 hours, and then the rest is practically metabolic ketosis. And this is how you wake up.
Mm-hmm.
Your body, your system is trying to do everything that is possible to keep you in ketosis, which is the normal metabolic state of all living species. If you are not, then you're gonna see, if you don't eat the food that is really designed for you, or really out there for you, meaning that you eat processed food and not natural source food, and you eat too much carbohydrates, which are in plants and fruits, that our digestive system is really not designed to digest, because we are actually carnivores, but that's a different podcast. It's a different story. But ketosis is the natural metabolic state that we exist in. Now, of course, once you eat your like chocolate donuts or whatever it is, you put sugar in your coffee or tea, whatever you drink, then you dismantle you switch from a ketosis, from metabolic ketosis, you switch to a nutritional glucosis, which changes this whole metabolic scenario, and deuterium content that enters your cells in the form of carbohydrates, glucose, because there's a big difference in deuterium content between carbohydrates and adipose or fat, uh, or triglycerides, simply because fat is produced from mitochondrial substrates. So in nature, if you produce fat naturally, it's always deuterium depleted.
Mhm.
So if you eat fat and you burn this fat into metabolic water in your mitochondria, then you're going to produce depleted metabolic water in your mitochondrial matrix. So this would be the kind of the normal scenario that your physiology or evolution or the Lord, whichever you like the best, created for you. And ketosis, you can't really do much about it simply because this is why you go to sleep. So people who don't like ketosis, they have to stay up at night and have to keep eating, because otherwise, if they sleep, then they're going to slip into ketosis. Because
Mhm.
once you use your carbohydrates, once you use your glycogen, and once you exhaust your gluconeogenic potentials, from gluconeogenic precursors and amino acids, during the night you start burning fat. And the rapid eye movements, the muscle twisting as you fall asleep, you probably saw those um, muscle activities. Those are to burn sugar as fast as you can, so you can spend the rest of the night in ketosis, burning fat or ketogenic substrates. This is what ketosis is about. So it's really nothing like you can do about ketosis. You can just get rid of it, like the first chocolate croissant, or I'm not sure what they say these days because I don't go to those. You see what I'm saying?
Oh
It's
yeah.
practically, this is what your body's trying to keep you in. But if you eat too much sugar, then it's gonna, over time, it's gonna give you some problems. And we believe that keeping ketosis, or keeping you in a ketogenic kind of mitochondrial function, meaning that you produce your metabolic water from fat, especially natural fat, meaning that it's coming from grass-fed animals, then your heart, or your kind of your physiology will look different, and your biochemistry will look different, and it better fits our metabolic imprint, metabolic nature, and this is why it's so important.
So it sounds like when people are in ketosis and they're saying, "Oh, I feel this amazing energy and my brain functions better and I feel like, I when I get rid of carbohydrates, my body just works better." And I think they've contributed it to, like, a lot of people will say, well, it's high cortisol or it's adrenaline because you're in ketosis, but could it actually be that they're actually depleting a lot of deuterium? And my other question is like, when somebody's becomes fat adapted and they're taking in fats and they're burning body fat, does the deuterium come out more then? Like, do we store deuterium at all in our actual body fat and that comes out then? Or are we just depleting the water that, or some sort of substance that contains deuterium?
Over time, you can deplete deuterium from your fat. If you eat carbohydrates, too much of it, your fat is going to be deuterium loaded, simply because it's from sugar,
Mm-hmm.
and the fat is practically to burn. It's your fuel.
Yeah.
It's not an anabolic substrate. You cannot gain net new glucose from it. Fatty acids, free fatty acids, but those are energy delivering. 1 gram of fat will give you 9 kilocalories of
Mm-hmm.
energy. 1 gram of carbohydrates is gonna, and amino acids gonna give you only 4 kilocalories. So it's less than half of the energy amount that you can produce from carbohydrates. You are much more efficient in producing energy from free fatty acids if you burn those. Now, if you look at triglycerides, your liver can still make glucose from the glycerol part of triglycerides. So when you eat fat, I mean bacon, you also eat sugar, I mean quote unquote, sugar precursor,
Mhm.
glycerol, that your liver can make enough sugar to support your brain, because you only need to regulate glucose concentrations because of your brain function. And about 15 to 20% of uh, like intake of your brain cells or neurocytes have to be glucose or carbohydrates, simply because the brain, it's not for energy purposes, it's practically to produce enough neurotransmitters so you can actually keep firing those brain cells or those neurocytes. It's not for energy. It's your energy is still going to come from ketones and ketone bodies of your brain, especially heart function. Your heart muscle only uses ketones. That's the best fit for heart functions, and it needs no glucose or very little glucose, or it needs insulin if it wants to take in glucose. So it's practic in ketosis. You don't need insulin, you don't need carbohydrates. Your liver can synthesize as much as it's necessary to maintain your normal glucose levels. You don't have to deal with deuterium. You don't have to produce a lot of hormones. That you don't have to use glycolysis to get rid of deuterium from glucose molecules. You can just use fatty acids that can, like using these carnitine transported and shoot right into the mitochondrial matrix to get burned completely for ATP and metabolic water. So from the bottom up, from the biochemistry point of view, your normal metabolic state is natural ketosis, nutritional and metabolic and exercise related ketosis, because you can get into ketosis by exercise too. And this is one of the main arguments of ketosis, is simply that's what your body is trying to restore every day by sleeping. This is what how the babies are born. This is what the pregnant first trimester um, ladies are kind of gifted with, the morning sickness. It has a very fundamental role in deuterium depletion and health, for that matter. We just don't pay enough attention to those details, just to those biochemistry, medicine or biochemistry details that actually explain why we sleep as much as we do, why you have less sleep when you are in deuterium depleted ketosis, why you don't have to stay in bed, why you wake up kind of fresh and energized. So it has a lot of benefits from the medical biochemistry arguments and narrative. And also it has a very important phenotypic adaptation capacities. Deuteronomics can explain you if you need deuterium, when you need deuterium, how you need deuterium, where you need deuterium. So it's more like a regulatory process that needs to be understood, and this is what Deuteronomics does, after all.
Yeah. So the plant organisms, so they offload their deuterium to make flowers, to make fruit. So it sounds like what you're mentioning, the carbohydrates found in nature, those are going to be more deuterium rich foods, and especially like the junk food, the artificial, the processed foods and things like that. So maybe we can start our little rapid fire session with like what foods are high in deuterium that people want to kind of think about moving out so they can stay in, a relatively, it would be nice to, even if you're not going to stay in ketosis, to have times of ketosis, correct?
Yeah. So fruits, carbohydrates, high protein food, supplements, and so on, plant source, those are all high in deuterium. And there's a very clear role to this. A fruit that has seeds is produced by the tree to propagate itself. It's
Mm-hmm.
really functional food in that sense. And it's also available for a very short period of time in the year. For example, if you look at apples, they only get ripe in like fall time. If you go up to like British Columbia. You can see the apple trees are producing apples late summertime or early fall, and it's there for the animals to eat them as they fall down. They have lots of deuterium, and their microbiome the bacteria can kind of grow in that
Mhm.
sugary uh, fruit load, and then they're gonna have a diarrhea, and they're gonna spread their seeds. So that's why we call it functional food, because it has a function in nature. It's not just to give you energy, because it doesn't really. And the reason why wild animals that eat those fruits spread the seeds is practically big. They cannot adapt to a high deuterium environment simply because those plants are very competitive to find, because all animals eat them, and also they have high deuterium, so they give them diarrhea. And even though it's addictive by taste, and they remember their smell and how to find them, and they would eat as much as they can simply because for them that's the candy time, or that's the Halloween time for the wild animals, because that's the only time they can get candies for that matter. But it's not long. They cannot go to kind of Kroger's and get a bag of apples. The wild boars. They are very kind of limited in their access for glucose. Now, in fall time, when they prepare for the winter kind of hibernation, they eat a lot of fruit simply to get fat.
Mhm.
That's that's how they accumulate adipose tissue. And this is why practically when you look at these very important, very critical chronic disease trends and the nutritional, you know, approaches behind those processed food, sweetened food, um, corn fructose, high fructose corn syrup additives. If you look at a processed item nowadays, if you turn around the box and look at what's in there, you can see that this is practically a candy time. It has sugar always, and it has these taste elements, so they become more and more addictive,
Mhm.
meaning that, the human consumer will look for those products simply because they satisfy their addiction for that. It's more, sugar is more like a cocaine addiction. It's really hard to give it up. It's really hard to um, change those habits. And for that matter, what you've been asking is simply how to control glutamate through food. How to control well-being is, again, is and strength is through food, simply because it's a very simple scenario in the sense that you need ATP in your mitochondria that is not competent with deuterium that you eat from food. Carbohydrates are very high in deuterium. It's about 150 ppm, 140, 150 ppm. As you go in the fatty range, or if you go into the oily or ketogenic or ketone range, or fatty foods, then you're going to drop below 135, 125. There are some, we measure deuterium in food items. If it's a grass-fed good lamb source, for example, that's probably 110, 115 ppm. So there's about 20% difference between sugary, carbohydrate, fruit-based drinks and foods, and the grass-fed high fat content, interiors, liver, and uh, fatty steaks and so on from animal products that are produced from these grass-fed animals. There are about 20-25% difference, and that's huge when it comes to biology.
Yeah, those ppms, the parts per million, they don't sound like a big drop in numbers, but even like a 5 parts per million drop can make a big difference when you're talking carbohydrates down to like good proteins and meats and fats. Animal-based products are going to be lower than your processed foods of any kind, even fruits, like you mentioned.
That's right. That's right. And it's the same scenario when it comes to danger, in that sense that deuterium is not very common, but it's very, very dangerous. It's like imagine an airport, all of a sudden somebody yells like there's a terrorist and they're gonna shut down the airport.
Yeah.
That's pretty much with deuterium. If
Mhm.
if any biological system sees too much deuterium arriving or coming in, even though it's not large by number, but because of the damage they can deliver, there's the same scenario. They're gonna change their security settings, meaning that they cycle more, they use more biochemical reactions to get rid of deuterium. Glycolysis has 10 enzymatic steps, and that's practically to check every hydrogen and replace every hydrogen in the incoming glucose just to make sure there's no deuterium that can travel down
Mm.
like a Trojan horse to mitochondria and pollute my mitochondria with deuterium. But if you eat a sugary food, meaning that your systems are overloaded, and even like your safeguarding systems are not able to deplete any longer, then your fat is going to be deuterium loaded. So your health is really at risk, meaning that it will take time to replace your fat pads with low deuterium. So once you start eating and living a ketogenic, let's say less deuterium intake type of
Mhm.
lifestyle, it will take years almost to see major profound changes. You can see changes immediately, almost in a few days, as far as brain fog, as far as start losing a few kilograms, feeling better, feeling stronger. Those are, well, once you're over the keto flu, then it's a little bit more simple to see, but the change you feel it almost immediate.
Okay. So we
The
talked about
recovery takes a little
replacing,
longer.
yeah, we talked about replacing some of the high carb foods with some higher fat foods to lower it. And collagen is another one I've heard talk about. It's such a trend in the health space of like, do collagen in your coffee and do all this collagen, but it's actually a high deuterium food. So people need to be careful with it. So we want to choose foods that are more like fat-based, animal-based, low in deuterium. What are some other natural ways, though? Because there's quite a few ways to deplete deuterium from the body. One of which is my favorite is sunlight. Can you rapid fire talk about that?
Yeah, sunlight actually makes these oxygen-hydrogen bonds resonate more efficiently, so it makes water lighter. I mean, just in a nutshell, that's kind of the bird eye view. That's practically makes water more um, friendly with biochemical reactions as a solvent. It doesn't have these very strong deuterium-related isotope effects. The the study by a German group was really like very interesting when they showed that if you make ice or water and you replace one hydrogen with deuterium, then about 1,000 protons will stop moving around the oxygen molecules simply because the tunneling is disrupted. So one deuterium can cause a significant damage when it comes to uh, proton movements and proton tunneling. And sunlight helps this process, this interfacial structure water phase. It makes sunlight, especially 670 nanometers, which is in the red zone, um, makes these oxygen hydrogen bonds more reactive in the sense that they can actually be more fluid and more liquidy, and especially in mitochondria where there is only structured water, light has a major role in regulating water viscosity and ATP synthase rotations. So it's practically helping you to produce more efficiently energy ATP from fat, supposedly, but also from carbohydrates if you are not eating uh, processed carbohydrates, but maybe occasionally you consume some in the form of a fruit, which again is maybe a delicacy. Don't think that's like a major food item for that matter. But it's very important to kind of know your little powering machines and choose the food that is, because your whole physiology, your microbiome, the yeast, the bacteria, those protozoans that live in your gut, those are all there for food-related deuterium, meaning that they harvest deuterium and they produce low deuterium hydrogen gas from food, and they propagate themselves. This is how stool is formed in
Mhm.
the colon. Water is reabsorbed, everything is digested, molecules are kind of absorbed and exchanged in the epithelial cells of your gut with the help of bacteria that live in your gut, and sunlight can penetrate through some of those structures, and it's just to coordinate through resonance these whole processes so efficiently, so you're efficient in controlling deuterium. It's not necessary or not only depleting deuterium for mitochondrial functions, but also to deposit it with proline or hydroxyproline that will become part of collagen. Collagen has 20% proline and hydroxyproline. This is why it's so sticky. This is why it's so hard to break it down. This is why you can still isolate collagen from a pharaoh's bones, from a pyramid, because those are stable for thousands of years.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
this is because of the high deuterium content.
Okay,
And
very cool. So one more reason we need sunlight and lots of it is not just for vitamin D, but also for deuterium depletion. So again, we're lowering our carb intake a little bit from outside sources. When you find a persimmon right now in nature, it's literally like this big. And so if people want to do, like you said, a small side of fruit, that's going to be okay. Your body knows how to handle that. But when you're doing lots of rice chips and Doritos and all these potato side dishes and stuff like that, you got to be careful because your body's going to get more deuterium than it has time to get rid of. So meat-based animal fats. Now you mentioned frequency or light from the sun. What about like limiting electromagnetic radiation or EMF or blue light exposure? Is that going to help with deuterium depletion? Because
yeah,
I don't feel
it,
like it does.
they all come together as a package there. If you want to be
Okay.
healthy, you have to get the you have to be exposed to electromagnetic resonance, which is resonating with your body and the right molecules. Rhodopsin in your eyes. Actually, melanin can break water in your eyes using sunlight, so you can produce water there, or oxygen and hydrogen gas in your retina. And you have to be very careful of electromagnetic radiations of all other sources, simply because those may resonate with your hemoglobin, ferro, oxygen binding structures. Those are not the electromagnetic frequencies that you want your body to be exposed to. Baggage cleaners and screeners and those kind of things are really truly, you can use those for various purposes, but those are really not physiological as far as they hitting your body's molecules in a certain way that is not desirable. Light, sunlight, vitamin D is very important, and it's a structural kind of breakage in a sterol ring between carbon 9 and 10, and that's a sunlight based. We don't need an enzyme for that. It's all light based reactions. So those have to be deuterium free, because otherwise this whole atomic skeleton of a steroid molecule will not resonate enough, so those bonds between carbons will not break. So it's a very delicate process, and it's very tiny resonance based scaled
Mhm.
energy systems communicate between the sun and your body. So you have to be very careful of really truly what else you expose your body to keep it really truly healthy and to keep it really truly functioning the way it was designed or evolved,
Yeah.
whichever you like better. That's practically the essence of it. And you know, um, I usually what I do is I just use the cables. There's no Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Yeah.
Turn everything off. I
Hmm.
don't have my cell phone close to me. If I have to put in my pocket, I put it in airplane mode.
Very
I
good.
don't let anything come close to my body. I have my earpieces. I
Right.
don't have these listen, I don't trust
No
anybody anymore.
AirPods. Yeah, no AirPods.
No, nothing of that nature.
Yeah.
I have a microphone. It's just practically nothing comes out. I just want to resonate my way to you. I don't want me to resonate based on terms of
Yeah.
some gadget and instruments. I only have a Corvette watch. There's
Yeah.
no
That's great.
electricity there. There's no blood measuring. There's nothing on me, especially at night. It's just practically
Very good. Yeah.
open windows, cold weather,
Hmm.
cold shower. I like to walk. Uh, when I walk the dog, winter time, even if it's below whatever, I still do half naked about an hour,
That's awesome.
and that's and take cold showers, and it actually helps to survive a very kind of sad situation when my twin brother passed away in 2006, and I was diagnosed with the same esophageal condition or similar, or a condition that was, you know, not healthy for that matter, and I didn't have much options. I didn't want to go through what he's been through, and I just switched my life around, just learn about Deutenomics and Deuterium, and so far is working out well for me, and I hope knowing this type of information, or being exposed to this kind of Deutenomics type of thinking nowadays, I would say, like, you have to think like a deuteronomicist, meaning that you always consider what's the best for your nanomotors, because your engine will eventually determine how efficiently you live and perform, and how long you live. And I hope this helps not only me but others as well.
Absolutely. And to speak on what you were saying, my mom's cancer was esophageal, where the esophagus met the stomach. So it was, I don't know if that was similar to what your diagnosis was,
That
but
was exactly my
okay.
brother's diagnosis, and everybody got scared after my brother passed away. So I had to go through gastroscopy, colonoscopy, and they told me I also have Barrett's esophagus with atypical cells, and
Mhm.
I should go to an oncologist. I told her there's no way.
Mm,
I take care of this problem the best way I can,
that's right.
and I switched to a. They found something in my right chest in 2011. My mom was diagnosed with kidney cancers 4 months after we buried my brother, and we put her on the same diet. She's 87 years old. She's fine. I'll take care of her. So listen, it's worth trying.
Yeah.
Definitely, it works. I know how it works. I know why it works. Not
Mhm.
everything, but at least from the biochemistry angle, I can explain some of the physiological and diagnostic events that can be deducted or can be kind of developed
Mhm.
out from Deutenomics. And there are now high impact publications, and it's getting very high downloading numbers and reading. And for that matter, I think after all, we are in the right track.
Yeah, absolutely. And truth be told, I'm the same age right now that my mom was when she was diagnosed with her cancer. And I do everything the polar opposite that that woman did, because she was quite unhealthy. She starved herself, and she would only drink Diet Coke and Tab, and she would never sleep, and all of the things that she did, I don't do. And so I'm not afraid of cancer because I'm not setting myself up for it. And I think everything you're mentioning today is a huge piece of that. And we can really do ourselves a service of staying deuterium depleted as best we can when we follow some of these strategies. Since we're short on time for a little bit, I just want to touch on a few more things. But exercise is another way to deplete deuterium. So movement, getting in movement. There's a big school of thought on deuterium depleted waters that are out there that you can get your hands on. But I wanted to ask you about certain supplements because you mentioned that a lot of supplements can contain deuterium. Some of my favorites, though, are a substance called methylene blue. And I wanted to hear your thoughts on methylene blue as it pertains to deuterium.
Yeah, methylene blue is probably the only supplement that I would consider taking, or I would say it's okay.
Oh, great.
Simply because it has a very kind of clear association with light.
Mhm.
That's why it's blue. I was taking it.
Yeah.
It was a while back then, but it seems the only, I mean, the list is very short that I would like recommend, not recommend because I don't recommend anything to anybody. I just teach biochemistry,
Yeah.
but practically methylene blue is one of those supplements that I would say it could be very like helpful in reaching ketosis, staying in ketosis, and to have your mitochondrial functions.
Awesome.
What I trust truly is sunlight, grass-fed animal source, a kind of a consistent pattern of exercise. I don't use elevators. I walk up and down the seventh floor maybe a few times a day. And I just eat once a day a big meal that is usually evening hours. It's a steak, grass-fed animals with good fat source of good fat source. And I don't take supplements if I have to, or somebody would say, try methylene blue. I would be happy to try it a few times, but simply since I don't feel like sick, I really cannot complain about my condition. I don't need any improvement. I mean, it's funny to say, but I'm 62 years old who have no medical problems, at least that I know of. And I can climb the stairs, I can do push-ups, 31 of them. Now I'm doing sit-ups, 10 sit-ups in the morning. I'm done in a minute, and do like 5, 6 kilometers walk with the doggy half naked. If it's cold, people are saying like, aren't you cold? And I'm like, yes, I am cold a little bit, just as much as, but I'm also thirsty a little bit, and I'm also hungry a little bit because
Mhm.
I haven't eaten and I haven't drank anything like for a few days. If it's, I like this, our body is much better adapted to limited resources. This is what biology is about. It's about
Mhm.
limited resources and using the resources most efficiently.
Yeah.
Keep stuffing your body based on radio advertisements, like whatever business or economical reasons. It's really not serving my health or my strength so well. So I kind of like to be in the very sensible way of color, taste, quality, and I like to have my senses always like kind of sharp because I'm always a little bit hungry. I'm always a little bit thirsty. If I'm very thirsty, I would drink maybe a cup of water. That's deuterium depleted water, but I don't drink just because people tell me like I should drink this much of whatever it is.
It's
When
great.
I
Sounds like
feel
you
the
really
need of
listen
it,
to your body and keep everything the way of a natural human. And I love that. So if people want to look up more, because you have really great blog posts, you've been on other podcasts, there's ways people can connect with you. How would they find you to learn more?
I have a website, it's
Mhm.
lazloboros.com.
Yeah.
It has an email address, and there are papers there, there are podcasts there. I'm doing some big podcasts very soon. Is because of the publications that are coming out now are very influential. So some doctors became interested in this, and I will let you know when those happen. I'll put you on my mailing list, meaning that when anything new comes out, I actually put your email on my mailing list. And if you have questions that you think I should answer for your audience, I'm very happy to do that.
Well, great. Well, I'm just going to have you back on and we can do a Q&A with the audience and let them ask you questions. So that's great. Well, thank you for your time, Dr. Boros. Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to point out that what you do is very important simply because you do this outside. You do this not only limited to like strength, you have to have a balance of some sort. You have to kind of play with your surroundings and environment, and it's a very interactive way of being fit. So congratulations. Thank you so much.
Thank you. If only I could podcast on my paddleboard, I would be a lot happier, but maybe, who knows, down the line. Well, thank you, Dr. Boros, and I'll let you go for now. And I really appreciate your expertise and just really respect the work that you're doing. So I appreciate that. One last question before I let you go. I like to ask my guests, it's a quote by Audrey Hepburn that says, "I believe that every day should have at least one exquisite moment." What would you say your exquisite moment was today?
I actually like to kind of stay calm, just think and turn inside just to see my outside, meaning that just to know exactly how I feel today and just to sense my body, just to see if these food items, these nanomotors are happy, just not to be exposed to anything other than just a natural environment and just enjoy the minute as listening to my own body and asking kind of what do you need or what do I need. And usually when there's a calm moment, it also takes me just to think about my past, just to think about my brother, just to do this type of work simply just to honor their effort and just to kind of help anyone who wants to get out of situations that are kind of hopeless or not really promising. In the sense there's always a way of kind of building from inside and expressing your best wills and your best thoughts and your best abilities to help others to gain insights or knowledge based on your work and your mission. That's practically what I like to do as well.
Beautiful. I love self-reflection, and it sounds like one of my other favorite quotes is, "The purpose of life is to live a life on purpose," and it sounds like you're doing that. So keep it up.
I just heard a quote from a friend of mine, and that was given by a priest, and he said, "Life is about change, and it's the best if you change a lot."
Oh, good. Yeah.
I think this mission is very important, especially when it comes to Deutenome.
I agree. Well, thank you, Dr. Boros, and I'll let you go for now. You're awesome, and let's do this again. Bye for now.
Bye.
If you are struggling with relentless fatigue, sleep issues, gut distress, stubborn fat that won't budge, hey, listen, I want to be on your team. Not just as your coach, but also as your cheerleader. My name is Jodelle Fitzwater, and I've passionately been a functional nutrition therapy practitioner and lifestylist for over a decade. And I want to take you from where you are now to where you want to be in a way that suits your nutritional needs and addresses possible health issues that you're dealing with. And all while doing it that it fits your lifestyle. That's really important. So whether you practice carnivore, follow a pro-metabolic approach, you're high fat, you're low fat, whatever your way of eating is, I want to listen to you and your body. You know your body best, but sometimes you need someone to bounce ideas off of and a coach to guide you towards more optimization. While I do work on nutrition, it's not always about the food. As a certified food psychology coach, I also want to optimize our behaviors around food, as well as entrain your circadian rhythms to maximize hormone output, since most fat loss and autoimmune improvement stem from creating a rhythm of light in the body at the right time of day. So if you have food struggles, or maybe you don't even want to tackle food, but you're looking for ways to optimize your health outside of your preferred way of eating, whatever that is, that's where I want to join your team. My podcast and my Get Fit with Jodelle business is not about me. It's about me helping you wherever you are to get where you want to go. If you'd like someone to walk alongside you as you navigate your health concerns, please reach out to me at getfitwithjodelle@gmail.com. I offer private one-on-one consulting at a flat, affordable rate so that everyone can afford a coach. So never hesitate to reach out to me to see if I'm a good fit for you. And in the meantime, subscribe to my channel so that you never miss the enlightening and cutting edge, outside the box doctors, researchers, and guests that I interview. And if you've been with me the last 11 years that I've been consistently putting out podcasts, let me just say how much I appreciate you, and I look forward to continuing to hear from you, maybe through comments, and to offer you this continued free education with real, authentic, sound strategies that impact your health. If you're new to my channel, however, and my work, welcome, and please also leave a comment, as I look forward to getting fit with you as I continue to get fit myself. That's what Get Fit with Jodelle is all about, me getting fit and helping you as I learn. Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you on more episodes of my podcast coming soon.